Okay, so welcome everyone to this inaugural conversation of the Center for Design 2024 Spring Series. I'm Paolo Ciuccarelli, I'm the Public Director of the Center for Design, and for those who don't know what the Center for Design is, we like to describe it as, first and foremost as a place, like this place, where you're at the end, where we would like for people interested in design research to gather, as we're doing today, to discuss and to share ideas. And then we describe it as a platform that facilitates and spark design research initiatives, where design is either a pillar of an ideal bridge with another discipline, or may work as a kind of a catalyst and facilitator for other disciplines to work together. Design often does that. And we also describe it as a hub. We love and we want to connect with other organizations and institutions outside Northeastern and in Boston and beyond to organize activities around design research. And the conversation series is one of those means that's been put in place to do that, what I just mentioned, and it's really a place for launching or creating or designing these bridges between disciplines. So we love to have people that belong to different backgrounds and people that come from different organizations, not only universities, companies, for example, and that's what we like to have with different perspectives. And just to give an example, last conversation we had was about design and law. So you may think it's two very separate worlds, but legal design is a thing, and something that is merging these two different areas. Not the first time that we talked about AI and design. We had a very nice conversation with people in the past about how design and AI may intersect. But I think it's a kind of a natural bridge, the one that we are discussing today between AI and data visualization. I think there is no better place than Northeastern to do that, with such amazing group of faculties working on both sides of the bridge. Data visualizations, we have an incredible group of faculty working on that in computer science and in design. And we have, of course, people working on AI. So I'll leave to the moderator for today to introduce the panelists speakers that we have. And Professor Enrico Bertini, that's the bridge himself, with one foot in Campus and the College of Art, Media and Design, and another foot in Khoury, the College of Computer Science. Enrico, take it away.
Thank you, Paolo. Welcome everybody to this very interesting panel. Thanks, Paolo, for inviting us to do this. As Paolo said, there's a pretty substantial group of us here who work in data visualization, and we have been in long conversations about the intersection between AI and visualization, and a good number of us have been working at this intersection already for a number of years. So we thought about, let's create a panel and invite some of the most interesting people out there. So today we have 4 panelists. I'm going to introduce them more there. So we have Mennatallah El-Assady. Oh, sorry, I have a different order. We have Mennatallah El-Assady. She's an assistant professor at the Department of Computer Science at ETH Zurich, where she leads the Interactive Visualization and Intelligence Augmentation Lab. Then we have Michael Correll, who is a research professor at Northeastern University here, and he sits at the Roux Institute in Portland. Then we have Hendrik Strobelt, who is a senior researcher at the IBM Research AI in Cambridge. So the other side of the river.
The nicest one.
The nice one. Well, that's debatable.
Getting into it.
And then we have Melanie Tory, who is also one of our professors at Northeastern, and she's the director of human data interaction research at the Roux Institute. I don't know if I said who I am or you said who I am. I am an associate professor here, joined 2 years ago, and I a double appointment between Candy, the School of Design, and Khoury, the School of Computer Science. And yeah, I think we can get started. The way this is going to work is that each panelist is 5-minute. Okay. And then we will explore a few questions. Okay. So you want to go in this order?
As you prefer.
Yeah, Melanie, you can go first.
Okay, let me share.
All right. So let me start by sharing my screen. So can you hear me well?
Yeah, yeah.
Very well.
Very well.
Okay, perfect. Good. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right. So thank you, Enrico, for the invitation, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Mennatallah El-Assady. I lead the Interactive Visualization and Intelligence Augmentation Lab, and our tagline is Bridging Human and Artificial Intelligence. We try to use visual interfaces and many different scenarios to bring humans and AIs together in a collaborative setting. And my group works on many different topics, like from language model explainability to graph neural network to architecture and medical applications. So it's very, very diverse. But what we have in common is that we want to bridge human and AI agents through interaction and explainability using visual, verbal, and interactive interfaces, and in order to do data-driven problem solving and decision making. So coming to this panel, I was thinking, like, what does this for ML have to contribute? And I think in the recent years, we have seen the explosion of many different models that people are using, and we've seen a lot of different interaction modalities, but there is a lot of opportunity here to also interact with models in multiple different ways. So interacting with models not just in a verbal manner, but also in a visual manner. And the reason we want to be able to interact with different types of models and different modalities is that we want to avoid something that we identified as harmful rationalization. So we want to be able to have a joint decision-making process with an AI that both faithfully represents what the AI model actually thinks or sees in the data as a pattern, and also is comprehensible to the target audience and the stakeholders. So we want to bridge these two agents. And for that, right now, the state of the art is very scattered. So we have some work that allows us to do, for example, algorithm-centric XAI and like explainability, interaction, feedback, and also some work from the Kai community and the Viz community that allows us to do human-centric XAI and interaction. But the problem is that we still need to bridge these two things. And if we don't, it can lead us to this weird place where people think they've understood something, they think they can follow a decision-making process, but they actually don't. They're just aligning that to their own belief system and their own understanding. So one of the opportunities that I see here is that we actually research different explanation strategies and mediums and look at where it can lead us down the road of combining visual and verbal explanation, but also different strategies of how to explain that. We've been doing a lot of work to map up this space. We created this paper museum of different works that have happened over the years. But in a sense, what we are trying to create here are different interfaces that allow for this co-adaption of humans and AIs through a whole process. And I'll jump now from the Viz 4ML to actually talk a little bit about how do we do that in a joint process. So co-adaptation as a way to not just do visualizations that showcase ML results, but as also visualizations as a way to take user feedback and put it back into the model. So one of the research areas that I would be very interested to discuss is basically how do we integrate different agents that suggest things in different visualizations. We have a lot of discussions about guidance and how to use these agents to guide users. So this is kind of where ML can help to guide users to a very specific interaction modality or specific decision making. So to conclude a little bit my pitch for the panel is, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, both on the visual, but also on the verbal side, to use these interactive interfaces as a communication medium. And we as a community should try to embrace that and take on this role. And one thing that maybe is a bit controversial is that we should stop just slapping maybe new visual interfaces on old machine learning models and just calling it a day. So I'm really scared of a trend where we just think Viz for ML or ML for Viz is something where we just take an old model, take some established visualization and pair them together and we're done. So this is my controversial piece for the panel, and I hope I could give you a bit of an overview of the work that we do here. So thank you.
Thanks, Menna. Hendrik, you want to go next?
Oh, sure. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I saw in the original admission list that I would be the last one, so I thought I could pitch on everyone else. But I'm second, so we'll see. Okay, so Menna had a controversial slide at the end. I think I have a harmonic slide at the end, but the rest is a little bit controversial. So, I mean, the question the panel asks is, where does data visualization fit in an AI-driven world? So I asked Midjourney to generate an AI-driven world, and I tried to place some data visualization in there.
Nice.
So problem solved, and we can go to the panel. No, but the question is, are we really doing the right thing? Yeah, if we think about visualization. AI, do we matter at all? So these are the kind of the fundamental questions I wanted to ask. And if you think about it, the driving factor in the machine learning or AI world is not. Yeah, you have evaluation data sets, and everyone tries to become better in terms of having the better number, being more performant, etc., etc. And this is pretty much contradictory to what we think in visualization. And visualization, we think a lot about, like, yeah, human is involved in the hand, and we can modify things, and we can qualitative output is essentially what drives us. Yeah, the question is there any intersection between the two of them, or is it just like to this junk that one side thinks the other one is interesting, but that's about it. That got me thinking about what do we think is this, and what we in visualization think is visualization is kind of this complex, multiple coordinated view thingy thing, and you get some insight out of it. You can accelerate this a little bit, and you put it on a big wall, and all of a sudden it becomes more fancy and more interactive and whatever. Does it solve an AI problem? I'm not entirely sure. So if you talk about visualization in the ML or AI field, that's what I think about. Yeah, this is like heat mapping, saliency maps, these kind of things that make things in the database. Yeah, and there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think. The second part I wanted to talk about, so I don't have solutions, I only have questions, maybe I should have mentioned at the beginning, is the question of dissemination. Yeah, so I can make a quick poll here. So who has seen this in the audience? Quite some. Who has seen this or something like this? Quite a few as well. Who has seen this? I think it makes it pretty clear, yeah. Like, so this is a piece of the visualization community, the other are pieces of the ML community. So the question is, do we actually play an important role in the narrative of the design in machine learning or not? Yeah. And this is one of my own work, so I can pitch on it. By the way, there is a very nice link that I wanted to highlight. It's from Philip Schmidt, who's an artist that uses ML, and he has a little gallery called Blueprints for Intelligence. And he took from like famous machine learning papers, nice looking figures. So I highly recommend it for students. The other thing is, do we actually dominate the platforms, the visualization, the interaction platforms? Nah, we don't. This is Hugging Face. Hugging Face spaces. Yeah, they have radio and they have Streamlit, and all of a sudden, people who have no real idea about information visualization can create nice, attractive tools. They look like they look, but they work. They bring the message across. The other thing is, do we own the business? I mean, this is not unseen in visualization. It's a projection lab. Most of us have seen it. Now, if you zoom out a little bit, it's called all of a sudden Atlas. And you add a little bit of machine learning stuff to it. And all of a sudden, you have a company that's worth $17 million. Yeah, so do we own the business in visualization? Probably not. Yeah. I have a couple of other points. I think there is a need for visualization, especially in indicating educational roles, in the qualitative role for data preparation, or for judging how well a model performs. And we have seen examples of that. There's this other term called mechanical interpretability that seems to be around right now quite a bit, which is interesting for intellectual merit. But if you look at it from the outside, it's often free of consequences. Yeah. So if you understand like how a certain, or what are the nodes in a machine learning model that trigger a certain activity or that trigger a certain decision, it's interesting. But the consequence is missing. What we do with this not. Yeah, I highly doubt that there will be a job that's called model corrector in the future, or like where someone goes in and says, like, I have to override this unit. Yeah. And I also don't see too much misrepresented. Okay, I think I'm up at time, but I might buy in 1 or 2 minutes because I did a little survey. Can I? Yeah, I think so. Okay. So I put out a survey. Feel free to write a paper, write a survey. It's shit. Please do. At least generate something. And I asked some questions. Yeah, like you should identify yourself as an ML person or as a BIS person. When was the last time you used a BIS? If you did use a visualization in AI context, what was it for? What was it? When do you think this is not useful? And then actually read the question on this panel, like when do you think? And then ask you for the name and if the name could be mentioned or not. So 14 responses were very quick and dirty. Yeah. Half of it was BIS people. For the sake of this panel, I ignore them. You can give you the answers if you want to. I'm focusing on the ML people because these are the people essentially missing in our little group here. And sorry, this is a little bit of a denial of service attack here. And maybe I should jump over to which visualization you used actually to where they think it's not useful. And here's one answer is when you want to save time. I think one of our claims to visualization is that you save time. But that seems a little bit contradictory. Yeah. Or it's always useful, but maybe less important when the model is already very restrictive in its outputs. And then, sorry, I have to hold my Zoom here. Then the model is already very restrictive in its outputs and isn't probabilistic in nature. Yeah, like linear regression, etc. I think it is not useful really for showing the internals of the neural network, particularly for very large models. Just feels like these things are so big that you get oversimplifications. Yeah? I mean, we have to break down, we have to summarize when we want to show internals of these models, but you get into this fallacy of oversimplifying. Last thing, and then I promise to shut up. When is it actually useful? And one example is to showcase AI in a visual appealing manner, essence marketing. Part of it is product dissemination. It is an extremely important component since it can drastically enhance explainability and interpretability for AI as one of the comments as well. I think it works in specific cases where there's an application that you know about and have the ability to work with an expert to ground the visualization in the underlying output. Kind of contradictory is super important when AI is used to make decisions, to communicate the trustfulness, weakness, and strength of the model outputs, and empower non-technical audiences to critically assess results. So as a communicator. Okay, thanks to the people who actually contributed here. Let's talk about that later. It's a big process.
Okay. Thanks, Hendrik. Go next.
Sure.
Hey, Melanie.
So I'm Melanie Tory. I'm professor of the practice, cross-appointed with the art and design, computer science, and I lead human data interaction research at the Roux Institute. And I'm realizing that more and more my research is falling at this intersection of visualization and AI. Started in data visualization, but more and more AI has been coming in. Done a lot of work in my previous role in Tableau software, looking at natural language interaction with visualizations, how we can maybe make visualization more accessible by allowing people to just ask questions about their data in English and maybe get a chart back to answer those questions without having to really dig in depth and learn a new interactive tool. And I've done a little bit in Viz recommender systems, so trying to have AI be a bit of a partner in helping you do your analysis. And now more and more I'm looking at how to expose AI models to an end user of them who is not an AI expert. So for example, how do you convey the results and rationale of a predictive algorithm about patients to a nurse in the hospital in a way that might make sense to them? So as I was contemplating this question of where does data viz fit in an AI-driven world, I was actually super curious about what AI would have to say about that question. And so that's where I decided to focus. And so I went out and I just asked, kind of like Hendrik built his AI-driven image there. I decided to ask Google Bard and ChatGPT what they thought of this question. So I asked, where does data viz fit in an AI-driven world? And I think the answers were actually both insightful and interesting. So first off, there was this summary from one of these tools that says, data viz plays a critical role in unlocking the full potential of AI by making it more transparent, understandable, and accessible to different audiences. And when that was broken down, it meant a few things. So really, this is all about communicating AI output and rationale to either a model builder or an end user of AI. So all about interpretability, transparency, ease of use, and in some cases, like enabling some interaction with these models. In parallel with that, there was a theme in the answers about model validation and feedback, about how visualization could help a model builder to fine-tune the performance of their model, to dig in and understand what it's doing, and to monitor the performance over time once it's deployed. And related to that as well is sort of a pre-model analysis. Like before you go and build a model, you might want to just understand your data, understand the importance of different features, which ones might be helpful in building a model. So I thought this was actually a fairly good answer, and it actually represents some of the current hot topics in this AI plus Viz space, including things that folks in this room here in this conversation are working. I've been doing a lot of AI communication work. Enrico's been doing a lot of work in sort of visualization for model builders. So there's a lot of interesting things here. But I also think that this answer is kind of biased. It's all about how AI is the center of the world, and it's really hard to communicate AI to people. And so we're going to put Viz in the middle as a communication medium. And that's all great and excellent, but it's all about how visualization can support and be in service of AI. And I think it's missing another piece of the puzzle, which is all about, well, what if people want to explore their data and answer questions with their data and use their data to make decisions? How could AI be put in the loop to help them answer their questions? So how do we put people in the driver's seat and use AI kind of as a support tool in that process of them working with their data? So then I figured, well, okay, if I want answers to that question, I better change my prompt. So I went and asked these tools now, how can AI support data visualization tools and processes, in hopes that would maybe get at some of these. So then I got some other interesting answers. So one is chart recommendation. You're working with a data tool, an AI could recommend either visual encodings that might make a very useful chart, or data that has interesting patterns in it to showcase so that you could speed up your analysis and find the interesting stuff. And so this is a hot topic in data viz. I did think that the way in which this was phrased was maybe a little bit condescending. AI can recommend the most appropriate chart type to effectively represent your data and ensure that you are using the right thing. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Get the money.
So other things that said were interesting. Right? This can be AI could be used for biz personalization. So it could understand something about you and your individual preferences and interests and maybe your cognitive and emotional state and design the biz to map to you, which might be different than someone else. And that's also a hot topic in research. It could be used for automated insights to go automatically find interesting stuff in the data and review it, save you time. That's also another hot topic that has been the basis of a bunch of different startup companies and things that are being built. There was a theme around analytics, like just doing some automated analysis in the data, things that could be highlighted in your visualization, like find an anomaly automatically and highlight it, or use natural language processing to go do sentiment analysis on the data, which you can then visualize. So that's all really interesting. And data prep and cleaning was another place that AI could be super helpful in that this is a hard challenge. Often 80% of the work of doing some data analysis is just getting data clean. And AI could go find errors in the data and maybe alert you to them. So those were actually, I thought, great answers. One thing I thought that was missed was this idea of AI supporting interaction in these tools. So for example, work around using natural language as an input device, which I've done some work in the past. So in summary, I think we need to think about both sides of this picture, how visualization can support AI and how AI can support visualization. And I think there's a bunch of interesting and open research challenges that we can talk about and go after. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have Michael now.
All right, can people hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great, perfect. Okay, so I feel like I've been sort of too negative about AI in my past one. So when I started writing this sort of position statement, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be more positive. But I ended up with this title, We Will Bury You. And I'm quoting here from Nikita Khrushchev actually got in trouble for this, like he was at a sort of diplomatic function. And essentially he said, like, right, for the capitalist states, it doesn't matter whether or not we, the communist country, exists. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you. So that's what he means, right? Is the sort of the functions of, in this case, communism. We're going to outlast capitalism because it was just historically structured to survive. And I'm going to make maybe a simple argument that visualization is kind of similarly historically positioned to outlast its competitors, and I do see AI as a potential competitor, right? So creating externalizations of data that use the visual system or use the tactile system is just super, super popular. It happened before computers. It'll happen after computers. You have things like Marshall Island tide charts. You have Chinese counting boards. Even the famous Jacques Bertin matrices, you see they're all created by hand. You even have things like tally marks that actually might even predate Homo sapiens, right? But then I look at things from the AI perspective, and I don't see those really nice human interfaces that make sense, that are long lasting. I see lots of contingent architectures that don't necessarily have a long shelf life, right? So here, this is the anatomy of an AI system. I was at the MoMA recently, and it shows just so how many things like rare earth metals, human labor and training data go into actually producing an AI system. And a lot of those are things that just don't make sense except for at a very narrow historical time, right? So in particular, when I think about AI, and I think here I'm using like big AI to mean things like large language models and stuff like that. Essentially the AI that gets pressed these days. You can do linear regression with like a piece of string and a straw if you want, right? But for these large models, right, you need lots and lots of data that you can steal. And people are sort of wising up to maybe we don't want to do that, right? Or they're saying, oh, this is worth money. Maybe I can hide it behind things and then let it out, right? So there's this notion of having lots of data that you can steal, not around. Lots and lots of cheap compute. That's something that's highly contingent too. And right, lots of attention, money, interest in this subject, which again is historical necessity, right? Like, so one of these things, there's so many AI tools is because you can put the word AI in a document and get way more venture capital interest than if you don't, right? Right, and that kind of infects the way that we think of data science too. So this is a stock image of just looking for data science, and you see it's some Python code and then a neural net architecture. in the interest of transparency, I will say that the other stock images I found for data science mostly seem to indicate that data is, no one knows what it is, but it's blue and has a bunch of complexity to it. Right, but there's this view, right, that AI is at the heart of data science and you have these other things that are peripheral. Which is a contrast from how things like data science were envisioned even like 30, 40 years ago, right? So Tukey was showing off the Prem 9, and he wasn't talking about like how much data it can crunch, how much big data was behind the system. It was, look how many dimensions we can show to people over time, right? So he's like, wow, we can show point clouds in 9 dimensions, and the human analysts can find things like correlations and patterns they couldn't before. That's a very different pitch, I think, than coding into a neural net. Right. But I do want to say that this notion of using a neural net, I mentioned is historically contingent. I don't want to mean like it's a fad like metaverse or NFTs, right? It does have some real successes. So things like if you would ask me 20 years ago, do I think AI is going to beat human players at Go? I would say maybe not, but you have things like AlphaGo, which are very successful. But it has some notable failures too, right? So one noticeable example is trying to predict COVID severity from imaging data. Something like 272 models were proposed for this thing during, the first couple years of the pandemic, and none of them were appropriate for clinical deployment. 0. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later if I have time, which I don't. So, but I do want to point out maybe this potential straw man, right, which is kind of at the heart, and both Hendrik and Melanie's talks kind of hinted this, that there's this idea that machine learning is the only way to work with data. Right, or it's the best way to work with data, right? And so there's stuff that ML is just naturally good at, and you should use ML in that case. There's stuff it's not good at, but that's because you don't have the right data yet, right? Like so, ML cannot fail. It can only be failed by you not giving it good data. And then this last one is okay. Well, there's some things it's not good at now, but just like wait 6 months or a year or two, and some startup or some NeurIPS paper will solve the issue. So what is visualization? What's its role if you think that ML is at the heart of how we do data science and make sense of data? Well, one is sprinkles at the end, right? You've baked your data science cake, and then the visualization comes in to make it look pretty at the end. I don't like that as an outcome. One is like a rubber stamp. Right, so Hendrik mentioned there's not going to be a job that's called model corrector. I think he's right. But you will see is people using explainable AI as an excuse to say, okay, well, now the model is good and we can trust the model to anything, right? So it's not there to improve the model. It's there to make you believe that the model is good already. And then this last is we only trust the model and the analyst is sort of getting in the way. So let's give them something to distract them while we do the real work, right? So the visualization is there so you can marvel at, oh, wow. So that's why I think they show things like the internals of neural nets. It's not because they expect you to do anything with those internals or even make changes. It's because it's giving something to wow you with how complex and nice it is while they go off and do the real work. Okay, so I don't like any of those outcomes. So I'm going to propose maybe that the reason there is that ML is not at the heart of this work. So here's my visualization straw man to complement the ML one. I think ML is a poor primary tool for analytics because it works poorly when you have small amounts of low quality data that you need to communicate with people, not just blind people with, but actually get them invested and interacted with. And I think if you take these 3 statements together, they cover essentially every important data analytics problem that exists. And so these are all bad fits for ML, right? So, everyone knows most of the time that people spend with data as a data scientist is cleaning and structuring data. This most recent example I could find from Anaconda, it used to be like 80%. So the fact that it's sweeping down to just a little bit over 40 is kind of nice. Right, and then most data is deceptively small. So here's a paper with a ton of my favorite people on it. They looked at repositories of data online. Most of them are, 2 or 3 columns and maybe a few thousand rows. You're not going to do deep learning on a data set of 2 or 3 columns and a few thousand rows. What you can do, however, is visualize it. And then last, there's this issue that when you want to interact with data, the things we have like LLMs are actually pretty poor interfaces. Because they don't necessarily give you this, as Melanie discussed, this sort of back and forth dynamic, right? You're typing into a box, you get a quasi-random response, then you have to alter your query and try again. So here, Manish Agrawala says that, that creates an unpredictable black box, which is a terrible interface compared to like how you might negotiate generating a picture with, say, an artist you hired. And I think visualization is sort of good at these kinds of things, right? As I mentioned, it's a very human interface, which is why cultures seem to ubiquitously invent some form of visualization at some point. They also ubiquitously invent some form of alcohol at some point, but I don't know how to interpret that particular finding. Right. And that's because, so the recently departed Leland Wilkinson said that statistics narrowcast, but graphics broadcast, right? So the example is like a thing like a mean or a standard deviation is just one number about a data set, but a visualization gives you a much richer picture, right? So these are examples of different charts that'll have fundamentally the same summary statistics. And so the ML model might give you the statistic, but it doesn't give you this bigger picture. So what should we be doing? I think we need to actually prepare, right, for a future where AI looks very different than it does now, right? Not as a form of supremacy, but and I think AI researchers would agree with the statement, but as one tool of data analytics, not necessarily the primary one. And one of the ways that we build for that future is by sort of articulating our own worth, our own value, our own organization and research problems with AI as collaborative partners rather than us in a subordinate role to those things. All right, so that's what I have.
Okay, thanks so much for so many fun and engaging presentations. So I thought maybe we should do a quick round on the positive side, maybe one on the negative side. I don't know, Hendrik, you can do that. And I wanted to ask each of you, what do you think, if you had to pick, what is the most exciting role visualization can have in this space? If you had to pick one idea, could come from your work, something that exists, something that doesn't exist yet. What do you think there is the biggest promise, the most exciting thing that could happen in that space?
I can start.
Sure.
I think education. So AI will be like ubiquitous in all our decision making. Yeah, so I don't share the pessimism that AI will not have a big role. And so we need to find ways of educating people from school stage up to retirement home, what these things can do, and especially what they cannot do. And I think that for me probably the biggest important.
And I think you and Mena as well are the organizers of a recurring event that is called how's it called? VisXAI, that has a very strong component towards generating visualization notebooks that are mostly explanatory. Is that correct?
Shameless plug, submit work there. You can submit everything except the fit. So you submit it, the notebook, Jupyter notebooks, whatever you can come up with, just don't send us a bit. Will happen this year again.
Okay, so for you, education. Education.
I think one of the big things.
Okay. Melanie, next.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
you want to go next?
No, I just wanted to follow up on education because I think my point would be very related to that, which is empowering users. I think like designing tailored interfaces and also tailored interaction dynamics that allow you to basically access the model in different ways and like fine tune it and like have a way to basically personalize and contextualize models to the context of your analysis and your data. Is very empowering. And we did a lot of studies where basically I went in and was talking to people about models and parameters and stuff like that. And they were kind of super scared about it. And then I switched using the exact same interface and just like talked about minions and magic boxes. And all of a sudden we could achieve numerically the same scores in the model optimization and refinement as a machine learning PhD could do without the interface. And I think, having a way to empower users to actually communicate with these models is a big, big role that visualization can play, especially interactive visualization.
So building on those 2 points, I think I would say trust calibration in practice. So like Hendrik said, these AI models are going to become ubiquitous. They're going to be used in factories. They're going to be used in hospitals. They're going to be used by a bunch of people who are not computer scientists or AI experts. And we need a way to help these folks to understand when they should and should not be trusting these models. We need to build a sort of level of healthy skepticism, understand what is the rationale behind a model recommendation and how should I act or not act on that. And I think that's the impactful role of this.
I really like what you just said. Do you think it's achievable? I know we had conversations about that. Because if we don't know if it's achievable or not, it seems like a really big scientific problem to tackle.
Well, we have a bunch of grant proposals already, I can say it, but I don't know, I guess that's the question.
That's the question, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to combine all of those answers, right? Like when I'm really
42.
like, well, yeah, that's true. I'm really excited that like in order to communicate ML models to people, they have to, I guess the word is they use is desanctify data, right? Like there's maybe this opinion that, oh, like this is true because it's in the data set, but I think once machine learning models, and particularly people are sort of familiar with them and have them explained to them, once those are common, then you get people understanding, hey, like my data only answers a subset of the questions I want it to answer. It's sometimes messy, it's sometimes incomplete. It can, permit a variety of interpretations and models. Like sort of just having like a built-in data skepticism chip in your head, just because they're used to dealing with probabilistic, messy models, right? And I think we're even maybe seeing that with ChatGPT, right? There's like a skepticism of sourcing and things like that, just because LLMs can hallucinate stuff, right? So that's my rosy future, is that we have a bunch of skeptical, data-centric people out in the world.
I have another question that is pretty much for all of you. I sensed from more than one of your presentations this idea that designing a good UI for presenting the results of what the AI generates is kind of like a minor task or not worth our attention. It's almost like below us. Is it below us? Or maybe I didn't get this point very well. I think it's not trivial to design. I know that there are many other things we can do, but here we are in the Center for Design. Designing good interfaces is really hard. So did I get your opinion wrong, or what's going on here?
So I don't think it's below us, and I do think it's a really hard problem, and I do think we should work on it, and I am working on it. So
Okay.
yeah, I wouldn't take that position. My position was just that I think that is all the hype right now. And we shouldn't forget about all the other things we used to do about interactive data analysis and what role AI can play in helping that. Like, how can AI and Viz be partners in helping people answer questions? I just think we shouldn't forget about that.
And
I think it actually brings me to the atomic imperative that I skip here. But I think there are multiple avenues like the visualization phase. Yeah, so there's definitely, what I said, like dissemination, communication, etc. And I think there's a lot to do in science space. If we go back to this kind of data analytics stuff, etc., and you know that because we talked about it a couple of times, I like to go by the sentence, oh, this is amazing, have you tried a bar chart? Yeah, because like in terms of effective perception, etc., we know that some visualizations just work better than the others. And I mean, there's an equivalent at the machine learning side. Yeah, I think nowadays it's it's amazing.
Linear regressor.
Have you tried a prompt before?
Yeah.
But so I'm very much in favor of also using the things we already have. Yeah? There's no necessity to reinvent the wheel for if your pursuit is pure insight. Yeah, in the worst case, the numbers do it. I mean, we see this. Yeah, it's not. Why would we want to make it more complicated? And again, I'm speaking here, having my head on for data analytics, visualization. Yeah, there's a lot of other visualization that's that I've touched.
I think I sensed some frustration from Menna as well. I think she said something to like, you can stick a UI with AI.
Yeah, I think I do agree with both points that were raised, and I think we should also still consider the design of proper visual interfaces and the communication and the metaphors for communication as being a very open and very interesting research problem. My frustration was more targeting the papers I'm seeing recently at the Viz community, just grabbing an old model, I don't know, I recently reviewed one 25 years old, and then just trying to fix a problem in the model that we already moved beyond. And I think there are just so many more interesting problems to solve. If we actually consider human AI communication as a dynamic process that evolves over time, we don't know what to communicate, when, how to do guidance. There are so many interesting problems, right? And I think just reducing Viz for ML as this exercise of just putting an interface onto an old model may not be the right way to phrase it. That's just where my frustration was coming from.
Yeah, and I would say my frustration is more like an interface for doing what, right? Yes, it's a difficult problem to come up with a nice interface on a machine learning model, but right, for instance, if the machine learning model has decided to deny your health insurance claim and you're going to die of preventable disease, I don't care how pretty the descriptions of the SHAP values are, right, in that model, because what I want is do I have any agency with the model? And I think that's actually sort of, and Melanie's talk sort of hit at this too, right? The real thing is that there's a task that involves bilateral communication. And if it's just, right, if the model is a fait accompli, then however nice the visualization on top of it is, I think that's a waste of time. Right. So it's, and actually part of that, right, is if it's a model that's not being used to do anything in the world, then it also might be a waste of time to throw an interface on it, right? To pop up Menna's point there. So that's my frustration, right? Is that yes, it's a hard problem to build nice interfaces, but these interfaces should be supporting, people in their data work, and I'm not convinced that just looking at a model is data work that people currently do a lot.
Can I react to that?
Yeah.
I'm not a panelist, but I take advantage of this position. I mean, that happened in the most complex research visualization project I faced was with genomics data, and at the end, what we discovered that wasn't really a UI issue, was more like designing the experience of those analysts playing with the data. So it was more, we didn't come up with anything that was really innovative in terms of visualization per se, but the way these people were interacting and the dialogue actually that I created with this data, there was like a mass cube of multi-dimensional data. So that was really the interesting part. That I think we came up with a new dialogue, a new form of interaction with them. So that's one. So that's in support of one of the. But then I also have a question that is.
but just to allude to this, because since you mentioned it, I think one of my big successes in visualization was a single button. And, we were on genomics data, and genes are encoded on RNA, on DNA in directional. Yeah, if you read something from left to right, it's something different if you read it from right to left. Yeah, and so what I allowed in the visualization tool that we built was that you can actually invert the reading order, or essentially just swap the left right to right left, and read genes always from left to right. Yeah. And that was the most appreciated thing I did by design. Yeah, so and it was riffing on an old thing, just a little modification, and it was already
experience design and data visualization combined. But the question I had is more about this rhetorical dimension, the level of. I think this rhetoric of truth was a problem that we had with the data. We discovered at a certain point that data were not as true as they look like through the language of science. That was the language of data visualization once, before data humanism became a thing. And now the problem is even bigger, right? Because data is not really always true, what algorithms, like, they're producing a lot of uncertainty, a lot of, so how do we do that? Well, it's like just visualizing uncertainty, the way we can cope with that level of untruthful, insight that we get, or how do we represent that level of uncertainty that is even bigger than the uncertainty that we have in statistical data? How do we do that? I think it's a real problem that it looks true sometimes, way beyond what it is.
Yeah, that sounds like a really tough problem. I wish some government would give me several $1 million in order to investigate it over the course of several years. I don't know if it's necessarily like a difference in kind in uncertainty. I think it's the uncertainty is closer to hand than maybe in other forms. And in fact, that's one of the critiques, right? Like I keep using this Johanna Drucker quote, right? Like when people see a data visualization, it is as if all critical thought had been precipitously just jettisoned. Right? Like it's taken as a representation of what is, like it's right, and it, goes on for another paragraph or so, right? So there already is visualization actually has sort of a problem of creating an apparent field of certainty, right? Because all of that prep work, all of that uncertainty, those estimates just gets put into a single figure. So I think actually machine learning actually has a leg up because, right, if I presented you the results of a machine learning prediction and I didn't include some of that uncertainty information, even I don't think you'd have to be too sophisticated in machine learning to realize that something iffy was going on. So yes, it's a hard problem, but I don't know if ML makes it a harder one. It might even make it easier in some ways.
I think I agree with everything that you said. If we kind of take visualization as like just a representation problem, an encoding problem, but if you take visualization more holistically as like an interaction problem, then you can all of a sudden kind of create so many more opportunities to actually reason about the data and the model and all of these aspects. Like, so for example, what if type scenarios that you could create by allowing people to kind of externalize their understanding and beliefs and just like looking at how that matches with the data and all of these things and just go through different scenarios. If we just look at visualization as a community, not just as encoding data, but also kind of creating dialogues and communication and interaction and all of these aspects that we do on a day-to-day basis, then I think it's a much more broader issue, right?
I love what you just said, and I think it gets at what my frustration is with this idea of slap an interface on an AI. Kind of the notion that AI is the solution, and at the end we just add an interface to it to make it pretty and usable. Where what you're describing is more of the grand challenge of how do we enable human and AI teams? How do we enable this kind of collaboration in the way we have human-human collaboration in that kind of seamless interaction model to let them do more together?
Yep.
I'm not sure. I mean, we talk about this human AI collaboration stuff quite for a while, but I mean, what we still have is the dominance. Yeah, like human dominates what the AI model should do, and you sometimes frustrated with it or not, and then you decide to ignore it or not. So, do you have an idea how a model of real collaboration could look like? And maybe that goes to Michael, because I think you mentioned at the end of the talk. And sorry for taking the moderator.
I don't have that solution. I hope Michael or Mena does.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think I keep using this like toolbox metaphor, right? Of like you pick the right tool for the job, and sometimes that's ML. So when it's something that you have agency to invoke or not invoke, right? Like, it's like, the real definition of democracy is that if someone's in charge, you can tell them to go away. I think something like that, right? And ML, and I feel in a lot of places, you can't make it go away, right? Like you have to talk to a chatbot before you want to talk to a real person, right? You have to, sort through creative outputs to see like what's AI generated or not. So one is like you can tell it to go away, or one. But I think the other is looking at Like it can't just, I think I agree with you, right? Like it's not going to be your job to interact with the model is not going to be to like look at the model output and give it a thumbs up and say, aha, this model isn't biased, it's ready to go. It has to be at a lower level of description. But I don't know, and maybe Minna does, exactly what those knobs of interfaces are. Like what's the attack surface of the model? Beyond the person who's training it to begin with, right? Like is it things like steering and counterfactuals? Is it things like, data cleanup, right? Or are these models so fast to train that it's even things like choosing training data? Right. There was interesting work sort of about like, using like juror learning, right? Like here's the output of a model. You can choose the jurors that are making the decision, they're making the model decision, and it sort of simulates what they are for you. And so you have some agency over like if you like the biases that you input to the model. Maybe it's something like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's something about being able to make the model stay or go away, and it's something about being able to interact with it at a level beyond just approving or declining the predictions.
Yeah, I think this would like I agree, and I think like I have grown to think about my research as not just doing like encoding or simple interactions, but actually the innovation part of the research that we do, I think, is more on the interaction workflows and mechanisms and timing and all of these aspects, modalities and so on. That is not anymore asking the question like, are people happy at the end? But was it the right time to interact? Was it the right modality? Was it the right workflow? Did we provide feedback in a contrastive manner or on an absolute scale? Like, is that the right way to do it for different types of stakeholders and applications and so on? So I think like the whole space, if you actually think about what it would take to make human AI collaboration through interactive visual interfaces, then there are so many open questions. And I don't have any answers for those right now, but what I can say is that this is what we should be researching, and not only visual encoding, or not only kind of can we just make one model accessible, but rather like how do we provide the feedback? How is it learnable? What type of feedback does it express the human desire? And like all of these aspects, right?
So I want to open questions from the audience. We already have a couple online that I'm going to read, but if you have any questions, be ready for it. So we have one online, which is, don't you think that AI and visualization will allow more users to create data-driven decisions? For instance, looking at Tableau Pulse, for example, and then what I mean is that it is possible that the current purpose of visualization and way of analysis will remain more or less the same, but including AI just lower, on a lower level.
Well, I think that is the purpose of some of the efforts that have been underway in a bunch of big BI companies and in research to try to bring AI methods into visual analysis tools, either by like highlighting automatic insights or by allowing new ways of interacting in a more lightweight, easy to use way, or by doing simple things like explaining outliers. So I do think there's been a lot of efforts in this direction, and they show promise.
You think there's a risk to have many hammers looking for a nail in that space? Michael is nodding.
Michael, you take it.
I want to point out that Minna was nodding too. Yeah, right. Like right. There's people are using these models for a reason, and it's because they do things that they think are useful. And so the hope is that or at least my hope, right, is that we find what those uses are in a nice way. We find out what ML's specific niches, as opposed to sort of this like all-consuming global tool for everything, that just augments, not to get too sentimental, but does a sort of Steve Jobs bicycle for the mind thing, right? Like helps me find things like causal relations, helps me do things like identify outliers, and the things we're already doing in analytics, but at much larger scales and in maybe more flexible ways. For good or bad. But yeah, certainly the tendency to just throw AI at every single problem, or we're doing this, but we're adding AI to it, I don't know, maybe it's a way to get venture capital or grant funders interested, but it doesn't particularly interest me as a generalized solution. Like it's like, there's like 90s adventure games where you just like every puzzle is like, what item do you use on this door to make it open? Like just rubbing two nouns together and one of them is AI and hoping something comes out doesn't seem useful. So I think, yeah, we need to think about what its capabilities are, but I agree that it works with a lot of the things that we're already doing with data and can make those things scale better or be more flexible or expand the people that can use those tools.
Let's see something.
Yeah, I think there's great promise in having AI as assistant in visualization tools, etc. Mainly, I think because humans are optimizers for laziness. If we can do less, it's always in our favor. And in that respect, I think the AI agents, like I don't know how often I set up a fast API server, right? I always forget what's the basic thing, and then I just ask ChatGPT to bless me out the full code, and then they're like, oh, I need authentication in it as well. And yeah, it finds the right stuff and puts it all together. So in that respect, I think right. Yeah, so it's very good use case. And again, you use it for creating meaningful visualization on your data. That Tableau habits, man.
Sure. Any questions from the audience here? Yeah, great.
I wanted to ask what you think about novelty in this context. Like basically, there's this fear, right, that AI is trained off of all of this training data, and then it's generating more data, is then being subsumed into more training data. And so I'm wondering if, like, we as visualization practitioners have a role in, introducing that human in the loop for the value of novelty, or if you could speak more to the idea of sort of thinking outside the black box.
We recently had a delegation in our office. Similar question. That's why I raised my hand. The question about
sorry, can you just repeat the question for Zoom? I don't think we've heard it well enough.
Oh yeah.
Maybe someone who's closer to the microphone.
You want to stand up?
Sure. Or I sent it to you guys on Slack if you wanted to read it into it.
Yes.
So the question was about novelty and if visualization can play a role in re-enabling at least that's for that. Yeah, so that brings up the question, what's novelty, what's creativity? And I mean, it's unanswerable in this panel, of course, but if you think about what these models are really good at, this interpolation. Yeah, so you train them on some data and they build like a surface, and then the surface you can say a little bit of this combined with a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And to be very honest, you think about when you have a creative idea, how much is it a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, and how often it is actually shooting out and extrapolating. And that's why I say, like, it's a longer discussion of what creativity is. But within the realm of using interpolation to come up with something new and new artifact, pretty okay, I would say. Yeah, sometimes helpful, like having like pharmaceutical use cases, yeah, they can come up with sequences that are actually not too shabby. I mean, what we are talking about is not that these things produce something that are 100% usable. Yeah, but they raise probability of having a hit in a pharmaceutical setting from 0.1% to 1%, which is a tenfold better result. But still, you have to do 100 tests to find the one that works. But in that respect, I think too worried.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I mean, we are using the context of an MSF grant about the product development and AI. We're struggling with making the AI helping us producing new concepts, helping designers to create new concepts. Not something that AI is very bad at the moment. But they don't have like really, you don't have a new concept for a product, like a sneaker, that's what we're working on. It's not there yet. It's still not something that is really satisfactory for designers. That's what we are doing. So work is creativity and extrapolating something new.
So there's a question here on Zoom that I would really like to ask, because we didn't touch upon this, and I think it's really important. The question is, what skills are relevant, important for a BIS practitioner in this AI-driven world?
I will say psychoanalysis. Right, as I alluded to in my talk, most data questions that you have are human questions, and it's mostly about getting to know what those people, what questions they have, whether the data they have answers those questions, and what you can do to make that gap smaller. The actual technique you use to, come up with a p-value or a chart or whatever is less important than getting those preliminary steps correct, right? And that's not about a technology, that's about making a connection with the stakeholders and the decision makers that you have, right? So yeah, someone who knows how to talk to people, but right, you can do visualization with a crayon and butcher paper, right? You don't need anything computational to solve these things. But, and on the plus side, if you know all of these libraries and all of these tools, if you don't have a good understanding of the actual problem you're trying to solve in the real world, not like how many rows are in your database, you're in trouble. So that's my answer, is psychoanalysis.
I 100% agree, and I think I could add to that something that Hannah and I were discussing every now and then when we were working with collaborative, like with XAI tools. I think not thinking of ourselves as AI researchers unless we have the background in AI, because I think like a lot of times we have a lot of people who think that they can do like AI or like model improvement and so on, and like some understanding of AI is just like ChatGPT, and that's not what we should be selling ourselves as. Like we have different sets of skills that are super useful, and unless we actually have an interdisciplinary background, we should collaborate with AI researchers rather than trying to like replace them or something.
I want to make a strong point also. I mean, I agree, but I also want to make a strong point about tools. So you need to be able to execute. Yeah, simply the fact that you can draw a visualization might not give you a job. I'm in design department. I'm very dangerous around it. But I think it's really important that you can bring it to the screen, that you can make people interact with it. And since we talked about, we want to extend the idea of visualization to actually interaction, and you be able to create an artifact to interact with. I don't mean you can interact with paper. Ways to interact with it. But I think where we spend a lot of the time on practical use right now as well is to stay up like the current frameworks. Yeah, like, and it has never been easier to start that today. And I will say this in a week again. Yeah, like it's a 3-liner to get some stuff with hacking face running, and it's a little bit more to get a little bit of a spell thing. By the way, spell is something you should know it.
But right, is that just a property of the fact that computer scientists are bad at tooling and think that coding is the way to solve problems, right? Like, would you be saying 20 years ago, if you want to be a novelist, what you really should do is learn LaTeX?
No, but I agree. I think you described, or what you described as an important skill is actually an important skill if you want to be a good computer scientist. Yeah, I mean, we map it to visualization, but what you should learn in a CS curriculum is abstraction. That's more or less what you're describing, yeah, like abstracting the real world problem into a computer problem or a visualization problem. But on the other hand, you also need the screwdriver to actually make it happen.
Other questions from the audience here?
Something like that.
That's one question. Can you come closer so that they can hear your question?
I don't know if this is quite fully formed yet, but
It's all right.
a lot of the times you see like AI systems being used as kind of a delegate or a scapegoat, the AI system made that decision, so that's how it's going to be. I wonder, like, when you put visualization into the mix, how that changes this relationship where you're like delegating certain behaviors to the system that are like unquestioned or does it make it more, expose it? Is what I'm asking coming across? Yeah.
It's just a very hard one, I guess. Yes. Could you hear the question online? Yeah.
I think like I have a bit. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I think I have like an immediate reaction to that, which is what I have been facing working in a very AI heavy environment. So I'm working at an AI center. All of the people here are like doing a lot of theoretical research on AI and developing models. And like, if we try to criticize what the AI decision making is, it kind of boils back to, are we trying to kind of find a better way to model the same data because this is the ground truth? Or are we criticizing the actual data and the annotation and so on? And if it's trying to fit a different opinion into the model that is not reflected in the ground truth data, then a lot of times it's kind of getting labeled as an overfitting problem, and that you're just kind of, by personalizing or adding human expertise or knowledge or whatever into an existing model based on a specific set of data, you're overfitting it. So the question is always kind of, are you trying to do that based on data issues, like trying to change the underlying data because you then train the model in a different way, or are you fine-tuning the model based on human input that is maybe not captured in the ground truth data, and then it's a whole different dynamic that actually happens here.
Yes, you wanted to say something about this?
Yeah, the immediate picture that came into mind was Dr. Strangelove. I started learning and started to love the bomb. I mean, it was an automatic. So if you've never seen the movie, you should watch it. And it's essentially the role of the German in this movie is that they created an automatic method that when one party launches a bomb, the other party immediately responds to the other one. So that's the end of it. And it's unstoppable. Yeah, so in that respect. And they had a nice visualization there you could saw everything started and everything started here. So the question is, I think you're coming back to interaction is probably the key here. It's not necessarily how you show it, but how you can actually interact with it. But that's my mind.
Okay, so I'll read another question from the online audience. We have, I would like to know how much designers and design researchers are included in your research teams, programs, and processes. Is design experience or experience design maybe and methods considered as valuable for the research on the human interaction with AI through database? So, our designers included.
So,
Is that a no? No.
Is that a no?
You can say no.
I would say yes, actually. So I think like like at least in my group, we have people doing like just design and design analysis, and people doing like the actual machine learning and explainability on algorithmic sides. And I think in order to actually tackle that whole pipeline that we've been describing and the collaboration, you actually need people dedicated in all of these different parts of that pipeline, and they need to be able to work together but have their specific expertise. So I think yes, there is a huge role for design and also design critique. So basically trying to analyze what are effective interfaces and why were they effective, and what are effective design components and all of that. And I think that's a huge part of that whole spectrum of like human AI communication.
I think I can probably add to that. It's probably not so much for research in our case, but research, if research influences product, then there's definitely this intersection with design. And I can, by random coincidence, recently I just found this letter. I think someone posted it, and actually you can find it online. It's from the former head of IBM from 1966, yeah, so 6 years ago. And he wrote a letter to the whole organization that like good design is good business. And imaginative use of design helps to sell our products, etc., etc. And then since design excellence concerns all areas of the business, you should make certain that all your people are aware of its importance. So,
I want to say something. it feels to me, Paolo, tell me if you disagree with this.
I will.
Who is not a designer? Because I mean, even look at his reaction.
We have too many.
Paolo, who's not a designer? I mean, is it is a person working in visualization has been mainly trained in computer science, but has been designing visualizations for 10 plus years, not a designer? Do you need to be designers in the box to be a designer, or?
Okay, I can only,
It's
only
complicated.
cannot answer in a few minutes, but I suggest you to read.
Well, now you're scolding.
Read the book. The
Go and study.
title of this book, MIT Press, it's Design When Everybody Designs. That means that it's true to a certain degree
Okay.
that we are all sorts of old designers, we design problems, we solve problems every day, kind of
Yeah.
design solutions.
Yeah.
But being designer, it's different than just being designer.
Designer with the hat.
Yeah, designing with a hand is different.
It's different.
According to that,
Interesting.
author,
Yep.
but I think it's true. So we have to leverage to empower people by using their natural tendency to be designers, so to solve their own problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, we recognize that and we play with that.
Yeah.
And be better and empower people, not just with AI, but in many other ways. So interfaces.
Yeah.
Let other people design in a way that is better than they can do without design.
Of course.
Designer in the hand. That's my take. And another reading suggestion is an essay on design issue about Robinson Crusoe and why he may not be fully considered a designer, even though he designed a lot of stuff for himself in that
Yeah.
island to survive.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah,
I guess the right question.
I guess I am.
But so I mean,
Yeah,
I would go as far as saying like everyone's a creator. Or like everyone creates designers, future.
So there's another question I want to take from the online crowd. A hard one. What do you think it will take for AI to effectively produce real-time, accurate, interactive data visualizations in a way that outperforms humans doing the same task?
Why?
Well, you said that humans are lazy, so if you can simplify work for humans and a machine can do it, why not? You said that.
I think it's like better in what way, right? Like it's a communication tool and like when you're communicating, there's someone who's there's someone who's a speaker and someone who's a listener, right? And for visualization, it's often a human on both ends, right? So the fact that it can go from 0 to bar chart faster may have very little to do with the actual communicative intent, right? Like, is it? I don't know. I would need to know what better means, but I guess that's true of evaluating ML in general, right? Like, by what performance metric?
Yeah, I feel like the answer to this question is, I don't think that AI will surpass the best human designer in creating visualizations, and I don't think that it should. AI might be able to make some things easier by working in partnership with the folks, or maybe do some things in an automatic way for someone who isn't a biz expert or doesn't want to spend the time building their own biz. But I don't think that it is going to be able to build the ultimate so-called, best visualization that will outdo something the best designer would.
Okay, I try to answer a little bit seriously. I think the necessary precondition is abstraction. Right now, these like large language models, etc., they are all we know they are kind of parrots that can copy and paste and make it well. but they cannot guess from like provided in like what's the right abstraction, essentially what Michael was alluding to before. So that's necessary precondition one achieves that. But
so may I can, oh, sorry.
A question from the audience.
Okay, she has to something to say about.
Can I
the
want to
previous-
follow up on what Hendrik just said, or it's?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say that there is an opportunity to also flip around the question and just not ask, can it be a better designer, but maybe can it be a better critic of the visualization that we design? So in a co-design context, I think like we could have multiple AI models basically be trained on multiple different paradigms or like preferences or whatever, and just like have like, you know, a whole cohort or of AI agents that kind of provide critique and provide like better suggestions and so on, like similar to what Melanie was like just saying, but maybe as a critique.
So for me, the question is a little bit in the perspective of being afraid of being displaced by AI, which I think we shouldn't, right? Like it's just a matter of how we're using AI and what are we going to do with it. So my question is towards more of that moving forward and looking ahead on how to harness the potential of AI to enable us to be better at what we do. I'm doing the information design data visualization masters here. So my question is, what type of classes or courses or dynamics among different fields we should be starting to design for our institutions in order to prepare, you know, the humans that want to take on these fields in the best way possible. Because being in this intersection, it is like the thing, am I learning what I need to learn now, or have the visibility or the paradigm shift that I need, because we're moving from calculators are exact to there's uncertainty, and we are embracing this uncertainty and how we can work with the uncertainty to be better humans, right? So what can we do at the level of institutions to start moving into that direction?
Yeah.
education. No, the
But
I-
what does it look like to you from your seat?
I agree. So first towards the fear, I think this question comes up quite a lot of time. Yeah, also pathologists feel threatened, etc. But I think I like the answer most that says like in the future, it's very likely that the pathologist or designer who knows about AI might replace the one that does. Yeah, so I think, and that's why the education is all of it, and you are alluding to the right point. Not everyone can get into all of the details of AI just to play this field. I think it's also pretty much true. But I think it's there are some communicators out there. They are not necessarily academics. They are people who write good blog posts, who read YouTube videos, all these kind of descriptions, all these kind of alternative media that I think are doing a good job of explaining what's relevant, what people do. Yeah, so if you need some, I mean, a good collaborator of mine who is an academic, but also a very good explainer, such as Roux, for example. I recommend looking for these. He's always trying to boil down things for us. And by the way, he's giving a talk now at Harvard right now about the 5 formulas of.
Anybody else in the panel who wants to give recommendations about
2 minutes left, just to help.
No pressure. Take your time.
Just that I agree with Hendrik, which is good change.
Michael?
Finally.
May I suggest to say something about the humanities, the role of humanities in this space?
Yeah, I mean, right, some of the issues with AI's impact are societal issues. They're not technical issues, right? Like the problem is not that, you know, an AI might be better at you than you at doing some particular technical task. It's that we live in a society where the CEO can decide without determining if it's better to replace everyone's jobs with an AI without doing, you know, the audit of what that entails, and that then has deleterious impacts on your life. Right. So a lot of these things are fundamental changes of society. And Anna Lauren Hoffman, I think, has this really great bon mot that I always can't remember correctly, but like facial recognition is not the problem. Like if you want to build a super racist facial recognition AI system in your garage, go ahead and do it. It's the problem that I have to care that you've made a super racist facial recognition system. Right. So if you think about people and you work to institute societal change, AI just is, you know, AI is a thing that people can use to do bad things. And so the problem is that we live in a society where those bad things can happen.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody and thank our panelists for the very engaging and fun conversation.
We will have more of those conversations, and the next one is in February, the end of February. I don't remember exactly the date, but stay tuned and subscribe to our newsletter so you will know when this will happening. It's about fostering social impact through civic design, and moderated by Sophia Bosch-Comet and Matthias Vicani to February 23rd. So. February 23rd, this is the next conversation, and thank you for coming or gathering in this space that is meant to host those conversations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
And the moderator.